when it comes to these pathetic Republicans, they would rather the kids be shot than let them read books. And it's not about protection. It's all about fucking control. Despite the Michigan State shooting, Republicans are still treating books as being more dangerous than guns, even though the guns are more dangerous. Republicans know exactly what they believe is the greatest. Republicans know exactly what they believe is the greatest threat to American students. They believe books are. In Florida, the possibility of a student choosing a book to read was deemed so threatening that teachers were ordered to lock up all books until they could be solely and painfully combed over by the censors. Now, as the censors make their way through the books at a snail pace, word of what has been officially banned from shelves thus far is starting to trickle out. Unsurprisingly, in a state controlled by a retentive fascist prick, Governor Ron DeSantis, the books deemed too dangerous to read mostly involve ideals like how gay couples exist, and there was once a civil rights movement. As Tom Fontaine of Tribe Live reports, the PEN of America, a New York-based nonprofit that works to defend free expression, had reported that the district had removed at least 176 titles from classrooms. They include works such as My Two Dads and Me, My Two Moms and Me, celebrating different beliefs, The Gift of Ramadan, the Berenstain Bears, and the Big Question and books about Rosa Parks, the Underground Railroad, and Japanese internment camps during World War II. Also removed was Roberto Clemente, The Pride of the Pittsburgh Pirates, which was a 2005 book by Dormont's Jonah Winter. Now, what I gotta say about that is that is fucking pathetic. Now, how are you going to remove a baseball player's book? Basically, and they claimed, that it would have racist sentiments. I doubt that it does, because for one, Roberto Clemente will be is 10 times the man that Ron DeSantis could ever think he could be. And the 32-page book references racism Clemente sometimes endured. But still, Republicans are so deeply worried that a child might enjoy a drag queen story hour in which drag performers use their skills at entertaining the crowd to get kids excited about reading. The threat that a funny person in a flashy costume might make a child happy is such that Republicans and state legislators are considering ban so draconian that they could criminalize merely being a trans person in public and wearing makeup on a stage. Now, of course, considering that the Republican hostility to children reading, the story hour might be as offensive to them as the drag queen part. Now, on the 5th year anniversary of the school shooting in Parkland, Florida, we're once again being reminded that there is a very real threat to young people, and one that a majority of Republicans don't give a shit about, and that's gun violence. Now, the nation woke up on Tuesday morning to a familiar news that doesn't get any less disturbing, despite being painfully common. There was another mass shooting, and this time at Michigan State. A gunman left 3 people dead and five critically injured. Now, this is in a year where there has been an average of more than 1 mass shooting a day. At least one of the survivors of this latest shooting also had survived a mass shooting 14 months ago at Oxford High School. At this point, the Republican callousness to the carnage is so baked in that it barely feels worth remarking upon. Now, nor is this just a matter, as so many claim, of Republicans being too afraid of the NRA to stand up for meaningful gun safety laws. As it's been written about before, there's plenty of reason to believe that the reason Republicans block most efforts to prevent mass shootings is that they benefit politically from both the feelings of helplessness and social decay that such shootings sow in the public. Now, please don't fucking tell me that you care about the safety of the children if you're not willing to have a conversation about keeping them safe in the place that should be a sanctuary. Now, this is what Democratic Representative Melissa Slotkin, who represents the Michigan district that the shooting happened in, that's what she had said during an emotionally raw press conference Tuesday morning. She did not need to elaborate on any further who claims to care about children, but certainly does not. She's talking about the Republicans. They claim they care about children, but they don't. Now, we've been subject to a years-long effort to ban books and gut the rights of all the LGBTQ people, and basically GOP says it's all justified, and their claims to be protecting children, which they're really not. The College Board, under pressure from DeSantis and the larger Republican establishment, has even gone so far as to remove books by renowned writers and poets like Bell Hooks, June Jordan, and Ta-Nehisi Coates from an African American Studies course. The excuse is that the fragile self-esteem of white students cannot withstand learning about the realities of racism and what people had to endure. Now, Republicans fret and moan over the supposed damage done to students' minds by learning that racism happens, or that the LGBTQ people exist amongst us. The much more real danger that comes from a bullet tearing through a body is not considered a priority, even though that is. Now, in the Republican imagination, a high school or college student is too delicate to read about the Holocaust or the enduring of slavery, but they should be tough enough to stand up to an armed madman mowing down kids with a semi-automatic weapon. And if such kids do survive the kind of graphic violence that Republicans believe they're too sensitive to read about, then such kids are also expected to be tough enough to endure members of Congress like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene denying that the violence ever happened and harassing those who survived it. It's also been a year since the shooting in Uvalde, Texas, that left 19 kids and 2 teachers dead, and a handful of Republicans decided it was becoming politically unattainable to maintain the thoughts and prayers, but nothing can be done. But they had a nothing can be done position that has characterized the party for so long. So 15 Republican senators crossed the aisle to vote for a gun safety bill last June. Now, the Beltway media, longing for a narrative of bipartisan committee, had swooned rapturously over this supposed evolution anyway, for a sociopathic disregard towards gun violence and towards something that's more humane. At the cost of sounding overly cynical, the whole thing was probably more of a ploy to get people off their backs than anything else. Now, for one thing, and for every Senate Republican who did vote for the bill, there were more than two who refused. Second, while there were some good items in the law that President Joe Biden signed last summer, especially closing the boyfriend loophole that let domestic abusers buy guns, the legislation stops well short of what's needed to keep guns out of the hands of unhinged people like Republicans who want to shoot up nightclubs, schools, and shopping malls. And to make it all worse, what little Republicans are willing to do in Congress is the real danger, and it's basically trying to being dismantled by Republicans in the federal courts. Now, the same week, Congress passed their watered-down safety bill. 6 Republican Supreme Court justices overturned a New York State law that is over 100 years old and which restricted who can carry guns in public. As Slate's legal expert Mark Joseph Stern wrote at the time, that decision rested on a maximalist opinion by Justice Clarence Thomas, who's a Trump ball washer that renders most of the nation's gun control laws presumptively unconstitutional. Now, sure enough, other Republican-controlled federal courts took note. Earlier this month, the Fifth Circuit used the Thomas's decision as a pretext to rule against a law barring domestic abusers from owning guns, basically. Now, this law not only protects the lives of women who are being stalked by former lovers, but it's useful in preventing mass shootings. Over half of the mass shooters have a known history of domestic violence. Now, sadly, many of them were able to commit their crimes by taking advantage of the pro-gun, anti-women views of local Republican politicians who won't enforce existing gun laws. Now, that appears, for instance, to be the case in the Club Q shooting in Colorado Springs that happened in December. The suspect had been previously arrested after reported domestic violence of a domestic violence incident that involved his mother. But the right-wing sheriff who had bragged about being a gun rights absolutist did not enforce a law allowing the government to take the shooter's guns from his own hands. Now, when faced with the carnage that their gun fanaticism inflicts on our nation, the Republicans will often pretend that their hands are tied by the Constitution, which it's really not, because they don't follow anything in it. Now, the GOP fucking cowards who ruled against the ban on white beaters owning guns used this excuse. The court claimed that there is no historical tradition of firearm regulation regarding domestic violence and that, therefore, they are enforced. And to believe that the Second Amendment's language about a well-regulated militia somehow covers unregulated non-militia white beaters. Now, this feigned and constitutional absolutism is ridiculous on its front. It's even more obviously a lie in the context of the GOP pricks for book banning. Now, unlike the Second Amendment, which puts strong limits to well-regulated militia on the right to bear arms, The First Amendment grants Americans expansive rights to free speech, something that the Republicans don't even know anything about. And it's very clear and very clearly states that there should be no law abridging the freedom of speech. That's without debate. Unlike the Second Amendment, and there are certainly no exceptions for it unless it offends the bigoted sentiments of Run DeSantis. Now, most of all, of course, this will expose how Republicans are only interested in controlling the students, and they don't give a fuck about protecting them. Now the threat of the targeted books is not to students, who will only benefit from learning more about the world around them. The threat is to the fragile egos of the right-wing bigots who make up that pathetic Republican base. Now this focus on control also explains the GOP's disinterest in doing anything to save students from a mad gunman who will shoot up the school. They may be saddened by a dead child, but they aren't threatened by it. I would be. A murdered child, after all, is unlikely to think for themselves, much less grow up to vote against Republicans. And ultimately, that's all the GOP is really worried about, is when they talk about the children. They're just, see, basically the GOP's fucking worried that when a child grows up, they'll vote against them, because then they're gonna figure out that the Republicans have nothing to offer. So basically, that's what it is. But if you like the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, REW King. You can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And if you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of YouTube. And for just a little as a few bucks a video, your donation can help go a long way, and thanks for listening.